going to get very angry at this video. And I'm going to warn you all, it takes a little bit to get into. Here we go.
How to talk to an atheist. Well, that's what we got on tap today on Unapologetic, where we defend truth without compromise with Dr. Bobby Conway, the 1 Minute Apologist. I'm your host, Tim Hall. Well, our topic today is how to talk to an atheist. And man, we could go, I think, around and around on a whole bunch of different subjects, but let's try to narrow this in a little bit. So far in this series, we've addressed how to talk to Mormons, how to talk to Jehovah's Witnesses, how to talk to Buddhists. Well, the first thing that we did is we kind of laid out what the Christians believe. And so I think with atheism particularly, there's going to be a wide variety of viewpoints on things like the Old Testament, on things like Jesus, because I would say that we can define atheism in a number of different ways, but it seems like the dominant way that particularly people on the internet that call themselves atheists are defining themselves are just they lack a belief in God. And
because it's all it is. It's a simple definition.
And whether that is an active, I don't believe in God, or whether that is just, I have yet to be convinced by any evidence that any Christian has put forth, that seems to be kind of the only thing. So it'll be difficult for us to go through that same process.
It'd be very difficult because it's not, when you say you're an atheist, it's not just denying the Christian God, it's denying all of them.
Yeah, as it was put and so angrily put across to us by a Christian, I just believe in one less God than you. But they don't like you saying that because apparently it's an argument. Yeah.
We are all atheists about most of the gods that humanity has ever believed in. Some of us just go one God further.
It's not. Sorry, you didn't turn down the lights and turn the camera on and sit down somberly before you said that, so I can't take you seriously.
I think. So in general, let's just maybe start with how we should approach someone that calls themselves an atheist in a conversation, because we're not going to be able to go down kind of what do atheists believe about the Old Testament and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, in general, you'll have atheists that would be functional atheists, but they would be, professed agnostics.
Yeah.
But they function as atheists. Now, by the way, we've got people who are professed Christians and they function like atheists.
And it's very true, yeah.
I'm now the leader of the Lapsed Catholic Church, and here are the rules, my friends. Thou shalt not, fuck that, thou fucking shalt.
So I would say one thing that we need to understand with atheism, it's not one size fits all.
Right.
They have their various opinions on things. I mean, you have the new atheists versus maybe your old guard atheists.
Yeah.
The new atheists are much more incendiary. They're like the fundamentalists, so to speak.
Yeah.
They're harshly antagonistic against belief in God. You don't hear as much about the new atheists today as you did several years ago.
Right.
I mean, it was absolutely the thing that everybody was talking about was the rise of the new atheism.
Yep.
And the Four Horsemen.
Yeah, because Hitchens is dead, Dawkins is retired, Dennett is all but retired, and Sam Harris only cares about Muslims and meditating.
Yeah.
And like the fundamentalists of atheism. No,
Yeah, we're fiery.
every atheist is a fundamental atheist because there's only one tenet, and that tenet is we don't believe in God. That's it.
I believe in all the rules that come with atheism, which is
Yeah.
I don't believe in any God.
Yeah.
Might be fiery, but then when you have to put up with so much bullshit that gets put across, you're gonna get fiery.
Yeah.
Because they're lying and they're twisting words, the misquoting things on purpose, and it's annoying.
Also, we're more fiery because you guys don't have as much control as you used to, and we don't have to fear you as much as we used to. Also, why should we respect you after the bad ways that you've treated people for literally hundreds,
Millennia.
Yeah, millennia. Like 2 millennia worth of treating people badly. Like, why should we respect you? There is no reason for us to respect you. Half of you act like we don't even exist and that we really just believe in God but hate him for one reason or another. Or, like, you simply don't understand. Like, I mean, so far this sounds nice about atheists. Oh, it's not one size fit all. No, yeah, just wait.
We
till
understand that you're a varied people.
Yeah, let's just wait till we get into it and see how that changes, shall we?
It's quieted down a bit, but it certainly is still around to a certain degree. But a true atheist is one who does not believe that God created this world that we live in.
Right.
They believe that we are basically functioning, we're dancing to the tune of our DNA,
Right.
as Richard Dawkins said. And so what that looks like is everything kind of popped into existence out of nothing, that we've evolved over a process of time, that when we die, we just kind of go back into the ground, that there's no soul that transcends death. Atheists do have debate around,
So, I'd like to see anything that doesn't say that. Like,
It just annoyed me, but it's the same argument we heard before earlier on in the stream. Everything came from nothing.
Some leading atheists contend that nothing gave rise to the universe.
And that's my eyes audibly rolled.
well, yeah.
So,
Because they fundamentally misunderstand everything, because it's one of the other reasons that we as atheists got louder, because it's not just, you guys aren't in control anymore, we don't have to be afraid of you. You don't hear a lot of atheists coming out of like fucking Iran, Iraq, and fucking Cambodia and shit like that, do you? Israel, or, you know what I mean? Like fucking stuff like that. People still get fucking shit in Ireland for being atheist, you know what I mean? Like, whatever.
yeah.
No, it's not whatever, but you get what I mean. But now we also can prove a lot of this shit.
Yeah. Oh. But so they came from nothing. You just go back into the ground, and they don't believe in a soul. Have you ever proved a soul?
Yeah.
Have you proved
Can
it?
you prove any of that stuff? No, you can't. So shut up.
But they don't want to, because they have to accept the fact
Yeah.
that when they can't find it,
Well, it's not just that. It's like, so where does the evidence for the Big Bang come into God's making everything then? Where does the cosmic radiation background come into God's understanding? Where do quasars sitting 10 plus billion light years away, right? What did they have in God's plan? Why did God create those that we couldn't find until we discovered that we could see into space with radios? You know what I mean? Like because of radio waves. You know what I mean? Like, how?
you see, none of it really fits in the plan, because none of it's in the Bible.
Yeah.
Really.
And like, we're just at the wills of a DNA. Let me explain epigenetics to you. Genetics isn't just a bunch of recombinated DNA that makes us what we are. We have epigenetics, which are different chemicals that then activate or don't activate certain genes that make certain things happen. So, we are literally dancing to what our epigenetics and genetics tell us, that we just are. Because it tells us how to be, it tells us what to be, right? It tells us that we are social creatures, or we have this. It's like, you don't just get Huntington's. You don't just catch it sitting off a dirty toilet seat. You know what I mean? You get it because it's in your DNA. So it fucking controls your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
the other option is input. We're reactionary. We react to what we see and interact with and learn.
So, like, I don't know, maybe if you over-torture your children with ideas of sin and burning in hell when they're a child, and they get nervous disorders because you've baked their brain in cortisol for so long because they're afraid of everything they do and everything they feel is a sin to God, and they're going to burn forever, and it doesn't matter how many times they apologize. And then cortisol flows to the brains for someone and gives them anxiety problems.
Yeah, they become a nervous wreck and have to have years of therapy to just be a little better.
And like, we can fully show how evolution works. We can fully show how genetics works. We are using epigenetics to such a level that we're getting close to being able to turn off some genetic disorders. Like, this stuff works because it's real, right? Your stuff doesn't work because it's fantasy and assertions and fucking, somebody drank the water at Lord's and was healed. It's the power of God.
Have you never walked into the ocean and parted it?
These guys, right? These surgeons that did years of study to save everyone. No,
Thank God.
But I drank some water at Lord's and it healed me. What? It's a miracle. It's a sign of God.
I mean, the doctor gave me antibiotics the week before, but the water is what worked.
What ways do we live in our society, right, that are at all, like, because the Bible says so?
Beyond churchgoers going to church and praying and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, like, did doctors come from the Bible? Did policemen come from the Bible? Firefighters? Engineers? Scientists? Like, electricians, plumbers, like all these things that we found through science and engineering was not because of God. It was because we discovered things 100+ years ago that started to start the ball rolling to a whole new age of technology. Because we discovered atoms exist, and we discovered that it isn't just the 4 elements that God put on earth, or that the doctrine of the signatures is really what you need to heal people, right? We found out that, hey, this atom does this, and it reacts in this way with this thing. Well, I don't know, say, maybe if we burn it, we could use it to power pistons that go up and down, to power other things. Blah, blah, blah. That wasn't from God. That was from science. So, fuck off.
Is there free will or not free will?
Yep.
They have debate over, is there objective morality or is there not objective morality? They have debate on whether or not we need to get rid of and eradicate all belief, or some would say, no, we need to be okay with people kind of, having beliefs. But what's interesting is watching how atheists will even seek to, hijack things from the church. So like now they got atheist church, right?
Yeah,
And they want to have songs and they want to read poetry and all that. So
yeah, it's such a shame that people come together with like mind. I think atheist church is fucking stupid.
Yeah,
But, like,
yeah. But
It's
they're
so
right.
I know it's so bad that people wanted to come together and talk and speak with other like-minded people, where they weren't afraid that saying they're an atheist will disown them from their family and friends.
Look, I have a community. 'Cause
Yeah.
humans like a sense of community. We're very tribal people.
Yeah.
We like the tribe we're in. So if we join a tribe and we go, yeah, this is comfortable. I have friends. I have support networks.
Yeah.
If anything bad happens, people have got my back. If something bad happens to them, I've got their back and I get the endorphins.
Yeah, it's weird that people of all forms gather in all sorts of different ways in a room that are like-minded, like a con. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's Comic-Con, look, a bunch of nerds have got together so they can talk about comic books or being a furry or video games.
I
or
almost thought you were
whatever.
referring to the church being a con then. I'm like, well, yeah, accurate.
Oh no, these social creatures that form together into social groups and do social things together. Oh my dearie me.
You formed a society. How dare you?
it's not one size fits all, and it's not monolithic, and that's one thing that I think to begin with. What type of atheist are you dealing with?
I mean, it's the one thing I'll give him.
Yeah.
He's like the only Christian guy I've ever heard say that kind of thing.
But it's not monolithic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'd also like to see him arguing with an atheist to see exactly how. And from what he says later on, I totally don't buy it.
He said the word, and he
Yeah.
said the good thing, right? But he's not going to live up to it like the
Yeah.
other guy didn't.
When you are going to engage your atheist friend.
And so how would you determine what sort of atheist that you're dealing with in that? What sort of process would you go through?
Well, for me, I think that it's important to know that there's not a one-size-fits-all atheist. Because, see, this is what we do. If we're not equipped, we'll think every Muslim's a terrorist.
Right.
Right? Well, every Muslim's not a terrorist.
Right.
So we really get a faulty understanding. So we're fed news of a certain brand. And frankly, that's what the world gets of Christians too, right?
Right,
Like
yeah.
we're all just these crazy fundamentalists.
Right.
Just, man, I don't like being lumped in as just one of those crazy fundamentalists. I have no real point. I just wanna make a point that he said that for later. Just want to make a point that, I don't see why we're all lumped in together as Christians.
Because he doesn't like everything being tarred with the same
No,
brush.
just you will see.
Fair enough.
And it's not that.
And so I think that if we're going to be thoughtful, we need to just be inquisitive in our relationships. And I think that's where you really begin to build relationships anyway. So you don't believe in God. Well, talk to me about that. I mean, and so you can begin to even engage what you believe that morals are objective. Do you believe that, that there's any hope beyond the grave? Because a lot of times, if you say, oh yeah, I believe that there is. Well, you might find that there's atheists that are professed atheists. They don't even understand their own atheism.
Right.
Like, oh, well, did you know that atheists don't have a soul? So I do think that there is, atheists have
But he
a
believes
soul.
that.
Atheism doesn't have a soul.
Right.
He clarified. He said atheists do have a soul. Atheism doesn't.
Atheism isn't a person, though,
Yeah.
I suppose.
But also, show me where the soul is.
I want to
Show me on the body where God touched you. Like,
Yeah.
Because you'll hear him say shit like, you know, the soul is like a homunculus. And like, you know, when people... Oh, I can't remember the guy. There's a guy, he's like, hey, what we do, we'll find out how much the soul weighs. So we weighed the body before and after death. And then it was slightly, like less than a pound lighter.
Yeah.
So what we want to be able to do with our conversations is get them to help us to understand where they are at, and then we'll kind of know what we're up against.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen.
I mean, that's a. Put that back.
Yeah.
That's a novel suggestion. Just
Could you please,
asking and listening.
yeah. Could you please just tell us where you're at right now so we can understand you better? You know what? Yes, that seems like a very logical thing to ask us, because a lot of people just go, we don't care where you're at.
Yeah.
You don't believe what we believe. Well, it's actually a very good suggestion. I'd like to hear more of this. Are you going to do it? Are you going to live up to it?
Right. So this is so when I watched this before, I watched the whole thing because I started it out and I was watching it like, that's all right. It's all right, and then I'm like, no, I shouldn't put that on there. Like, and I'm like, no, I should. Like, why shouldn't I put on videos that say good things? And like, go maybe this is the type of Christian that would be all right. And I'm like, all right then. And then it gets to a point, and it's not the case anymore.
Yeah. I'm going to still give it the benefit of the doubt you gave it at first, because I'm going to respond to it as it's happening, having not watched it, right?
Them to help us to understand where they are at, and then we'll kind of know what we're up against.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen be the biggest dividing line in a lot of atheist Christian conversations is kind of the way we know things. What we agree is evidence. So even something as historically reliable as the existence of Jesus as a itinerant preacher 2,000 years ago, there are a small group of people, but that number is growing. That's called Jesus mythicists that don't even give any kind of weight or credence to the historical data out there. What should we do with somebody like that that's saying, I don't even think that Jesus ever existed as a person, let alone rose from the dead or is God at all? Where would you start with some of those questions?
Well, that's because the actual historical evidence for Jesus is so ridiculously low. It's laughable. It's just laughable. So you've got Josephus, who was born in around 37 CE, around 4 to 10 years after Jesus died, writing about Christians and what Christians said about Jesus 50 to 60 years later.
It's like a third-person account way after the fact.
Taken from people who didn't know how to read and write, who weren't there, and are telling the same stories that other people told. Now, you want to say that, now they're going to say, oh, well, the Bible says that Jesus existed because there's 4 Gospels devoted to him. Now, I'd also like to point out that Jesus is barely in Acts. He shows up at the very beginning and talks to, his disciples a little bit, and he disappears, and he appears to Paul, and he disappears. And then in Paul's letters, he very, very, almost never mentions Jesus. Because Paul, specifically, there's 13 Pauline letters, and all historians basically say only about 6 or 7 of them are actually really Paul's letters. Now, actual Pauline epistles don't say very much about Jesus. That almost say nothing about Jesus that isn't attested in those are the ones in the first 4 Gospels. So they're not. It's not independently attested, and because it's not independently attested, it's not proof. Now you want to talk about the 4 Gospels of the Bible. Well, the 4 Gospels of the Bible, they have differing stories, like all over the place.
Stop! Blasphemer!
Did Jesus bring Lazarus back to life and tell everyone to tell everyone? Or did he bring some woman back to life and tell everyone that started not to tell anyone? Hi, Editor Zach here. I made a mistake. I often do. It's the fun of streaming. I don't get to edit myself like I do now. Oh well. Anyway, it's not... I brought up Lazarus because I thought it was 2 different stories that... It's not. There are 2 different resurrection stories. There is the resurrection of Lazarus, of course. But this one is the resurrection of a synagogue leader or a person named Jairus. And Jesus resurrecting their daughter. So I thought this would be a perfect time to really show and explain a little bit, at least, the different ways that you can read the Gospels. Now, you can read them vertically, which is the way they were written in the book, or you can read them horizontally. So first, I shall read them vertically. Matthew. When Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house and saw the noisy crowd and people playing pipes, he said, "Go away! The girl is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took the girl by the hand, and she got up. News of this spread throughout all that region. Now in Mark, when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion, with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he'd put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said, Talitha koyum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. I've probably butchered that, but you'll have to deal. Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old, and at this they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this, and he told them to give her something to eat. In Luke, when he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, the people were wailing and mourning for her. "Stop wailing," Jesus said. "She is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand, and he said, "My child, get up." Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. Now you can already see some differences there. But now we're going to read them horizontally. Because when you read them horizontally and you look at them verse by verse, maybe verse in a bit or something like that, depending, you can really get into detail about the different changes. Now, some of these changes might seem pretty small, but for a story from a book that's supposed to be, divinely inspired in the inerrant word of God, there really shouldn't be almost any, differences aside from maybe some grammatical differences, writing styles, stuff like that. But we'll see that isn't necessarily the case. So, in Matthew, when Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house, and they saw the noisy crowd and people playing pipes. Mark, when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion, with people crying and wailing loudly. And in Luke, when he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. So we can see straight away that in Matthew and Mark, it's putting across more that he went to a Jewish leader's house so he could show this Jewish leader, the powers that he had. But in Luke, it just says Jairus. Now this could be, the Jewish leader's house, but considering it doesn't say that in the other two Gospels, we're not quite sure and we'll never know. But outside of that, you could easily look at that and say, well, I don't know, how about they wanted to distance themselves from them trying to show the Jews, maybe wanted to show more of the Gentile stuff, or, just shy away from the fact of him doing things for the Jews to, really separate Christianity and Jesus from its Jewish heritage. And also, it's a little thing, but only in Matthew are people playing pipes. They're crying and wailing loudly in Mark, and they're wailing and mourning for her in Luke. Of course, it can just be, writing style and grammatical differences with the wailing and crying, but the lack of pipes, while a small thing, all the small things lead into bigger things. Because the bigger thing is the number of differences, and with 4 stories that are supposed to be the same person's life, especially when you see a thing like this showing the same story, they should be more accurate, do you not think? And then, in Matthew, he said, "Go away, the girl is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. In Mark, he went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. And in Luke, Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. "Stop wailing," Jesus said. "She is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. So we have people, inside the house, except for Luke, where it's only him and the people that go in. In Luke, they're outside. But, Jesus says to them, some variation of, "Go away, the girl is not dead, but asleep." But is it, though? Go away, the girl is not dead, but asleep. Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. Stop wailing. She is not dead, but asleep. I mean, that's 3 different sentences right there. And only in one of them does he actually verbally command them to go away. And the other one, "Go away, the child is not dead but asleep." Saying, you don't need to mourn, she's just sleeping, it's fine. You know what I mean? Why all this commotion and wailing? Why? He's asking them rhetorically in Mark. Why all the commotion and wailing? You don't need to worry about her, she's asleep. And then in Luke, it's a command. Stop wailing. The girl is not dead but asleep. 3 different inflections for the same sentence. Now, considering it's the same story, they should be the same, considering we're talking about the accurate and divinely inspired inerrant word of God and Jesus. In Matthew, after the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took the girl by the hand, and she got up. In Mark, but they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talthia cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Deal with it, I don't know those words. Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old, and they were completely astonished. But he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. So, he puts the crowd outside in Matthew. He puts the crowd outside in Mark. But in Luke, it is only him and the disciples and the parents that go in. The people are already outside, so he doesn't have to command them to go outside. So, already you have a difference there. You know what I mean? Matthew he just fucking went in, grabbed her hand, didn't say anything, and she got up. It was just the power of his touch. The divine touch brought the healing power into her. But in Mark, it's more of a command. It's also more. In Mark and Luke, it is more of a command. He says that I say to you, get up. It's not just that he grabbing her by the hand and the divine touch. It's the power of his words bringing it to the foreground as well. And in Mark, it specifies more what she did. She walked around, and also in Mark, it takes the time to tell you how old she is, even though the other two do not. And finally, Matthew, news of this spread through all of that region. Mark, he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this, and he told them to give her something to eat. And in Luke, her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. Now, this is a pretty stark difference, and, it was the reason I brought this one up more than the others, but this is the kind of stuff you can see when you read, horizontally. And this is me not just, having a quick glance and, recording this now. There may be other things I've missed. Why don't you look? There's plenty of other stories in the Gospels that are in multiple Gospels. Read them vertically, see what differences you find. But the fact that Matthew tells you that the news of this spread out throughout the land, and the other two don't, You know, he orders them to not say. Do you know what I mean? Like, why the difference? And these are two, you know, you can't, you know, like, it doesn't make sense how you could have them spread it all throughout the land, but also Jesus makes them not say anything. And the real point to this and the coming examples of differences in the Gospels are, if there's differences in the Gospels, and it's the divinely inerrant Word of God, then it's either all correct or it's made up. Because how can you ever purport to know what actually happened if all the versions you have aren't what happened if it did happen? Because various bits aren't right, so you can't know which bits to follow. You can't know which bits actually happened, which bits were made up by man later for other reasons, and you don't know if any of those bits that were added in, changed, or mistakenly translated, right, make any real differences to what Jesus actually said and did. And if he is the Son of God and he did resurrect, then we should know those differences and why they were put there to actually get closer to his actual word, should we not? Instead of just going, well, this book's been around for a while, so I guess it's okay. When did he die? What does he say on the cross? He says 4 different things. Like, there's differing things about the birth story. You know what I mean? The 3 wise men's only in one of the 2 birth accounts of Jesus. When did he go into the temple and say, hey, and kick over the tables and go, you've turned my father's house into a den of thieves? Because it happens at different times. Like, like, there's so many inconsistencies in these 4 accounts that, by the way, the earliest was only written 30 to 40 years after Jesus' death. So that's like saying, we're in 2023 right now, so that's like saying, what happened in 1983? Reagan and Thatcher, it's like talking about early Reagan, right? And only through word of mouth from nobody who's been on the internet. And has no TV and stuff like that, and doesn't read books, and it's only spread by what people have told them. And you're expecting some kind of, like, honesty in those tellings, especially when the people that are telling these stories are trying to convince other people that they're correct, right? When there's no codified, and we're talking 30, 40 years of uncodified Christian teaching from people who never really saw Jesus or anything, just making up stuff to convince other people. And you know how we know this? Because we have so many different versions of the Gospels. We have Orthodox Gospels, we have Jewish Gospels. Like, come on, the first Gospel talks about how Jesus is just a Jew and you should just be a Jew, man. And then as it progresses, it gets less and less Jewy and it turns more and more Christian. Well, the Jews don't listen, so we're going to preach to the Gentiles. That's not what it says originally. And like, the fact that the Bible doesn't even fucking... That's a different point anyway. Like, Luke is a Matthew, Luke and Acts are together, but the Bible didn't know. The people who put the Bible together didn't know that, so they put John in the middle. Like, Acts and Luke are written by the same person, but so the people who arranged the Bible didn't know that, didn't put them together. Interrupted by John. Yeah, we interrupt the story to bring you. Even the fact they're called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They weren't originally called Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. Those were names that were given later because people made up shit to try and make these accounts look credible by going, dude, they were there. They were scribes that followed them around. Yeah, these scribes that followed Jesus around in Galilee that totally knew how to write Greek, where all they spoke was Aramaic. That totally happened. So, I'm sorry that I don't find your evidence for even the existence of Jesus to be even slightly credible. Because, like, what? Pliny mentions... No, Pliny never mentions Jesus. Like, no comparable historian at the time talks about Jesus. And, like, after 100 years after his death, there's loads of people talking about Jesus. Mm-hmm. But before that, there isn't almost anyone. And even the people that do aren't talking about the veracity of Jesus' existence or anything like that. They're just simply saying there was a group of people called Christus who believed in a man called Jesus. And that's it. As for the death and the resurrection that they were brought up, they don't believe in the resurrection.
Why would we?
Yeah.
We have no evidence of resurrections happening beyond CPR bringing someone who's just recently died back to life.
I mean, like,
and that's
the
a recent
resurrection
thing.
story doesn't even comport with the other resurrection stories. And, like...
Yeah. Oh, we found Jesus' tomb. But no, you've not. you don't.
Yeah,
have
it's
it.
it's weird. It's like, so when we talk about Sargon of Akkad, right? When we talk about Mesopotamian first fucking emperor Sargon of Akkad, we don't have a bunch of conflicting stories and no corroborating outside evidence. We have lots of stories that are the same, with fucking people outside of the city he was in talking about warring against him because he was a real person who existed, who had an influence in the world.
Yeah, it's funny how the real people that existed have a lot of evidence to suggest they existed, and the ones they claim to exist but didn't, don't.
Yeah.
A lack of evidence suggests a lack of existence there, I'm
Yeah.
afraid. You can't prove his existence. You don't have anything to prove it. If you do have something that proves it,
They'd be shouting it from the fucking rooftops.
they would, and we would all know. And if we knew, we wouldn't be arguing that it didn't exist.
Oh, come on.
We'd be arguing the point
But
of...
come on, have you not seen the Shroud of Turin?
Which one, the real one or the fake one?
Which one?
But, yeah, if they had proof of Jesus, we wouldn't be arguing his existence. We'd be arguing what he did and what he taught.
Yep.
And which accounts of his history are real and which are not.
And like, see, the thing is, right, is historians do this shit about all historical documents, and not just about Jesus. And like, there's no attestation outside of Christian writings saying that Jesus was a real person. There just isn't. And saying that there is wholly disingenuous and either a lie of omission or a straight outright lie from
Yeah, you can't prove it, and the day you can, we'll just believe it, because you'll have proof, and we'll understand that it's something that he existed,
Yeah.
you know, and then we'll change the argument to what was said and done at the time.
Yeah.
But until that time, you don't get to be upset that we don't believe Jesus existed. You just don't.
Yep.
You can't be upset by it. It's a logical thing to not believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thankful that isn't some massive movement. I mean, Richard Carrier was kind of, carrying the torch on that. And he's kind of become a bit irrelevant, in the last few years. I do think that's a high price tag. I want people to understand the price tag of something. Mm-hmm. Do you understand if you're going to dismiss the existence of Jesus, if you're going to treat history in the way that you have arrived at this conclusion by deconstructing it to the point that he never existed, are you willing to do that with all history?
Is the price on that price tag too high to pay? Do you like treating history like it's your dirty bitch? Will the fat, angry gay continue living in sin, or will he finally settle down and find true love? Aww. Will these godfathers change the minds of our intrepid heroes? And will Zakaran continue to misunderstand circles, always thinking that all the corners have to equal 90 degrees? Find out the answers to these questions and many more next time on The Shaken Fist!